Hello and welcome back to Between the Hashes, our college football primer. Notice how I left out weekly because I'm doing more than one episode this week. I wanted to do a quick reaction to the college football committee picking its top four today. I'm sorry I had waited so long in the day to get this up. I will be talking about the Heisman and the Army-Navy game next Friday, so stay tuned for that. But now let's talk about what we've been building towards this whole season with the top four. So the committee, as of today, following the conference championship games in which Florida State, Alabama, Michigan, Washington, and Texas all won their respective conferences. With those 5 teams won, 4 of them were picked, and the final 4 in order are as follows: Michigan, Washington, Texas, Alabama, with Michigan and Alabama set to play in the Rose Bowl and Washington and Texas set to play in the Sugar Bowl. Well, I had a slightly different top 4 prediction last week. I'll defend my logic, if not my picks. Yeah, so this is just going to be an off the cuff. Normally I script these videos. I'm just giving my sheer reaction to this one. With Georgia losing, slotting Michigan in at number 1 seems to be the right move. It was either... I think you could justifiably only have put either them or Washington up at 1, and so I don't really have any issues with that. Number 2, Washington, which, by the way, I think we all, myself included, even though I thought the line on the Washington game being like a double-digit line was insane, we all owe Washington a massive apology. They more than earned their spot, and I think with Washington, it was just crazy to disrespect them the way they had, because the way people were talking about that Oregon game was as if Oregon beat them the first time. I've never seen a team get so much credit for losing a game before. And sure, Washington really didn't look as sharp as they did, and Penix's numbers took a dip and probably will give Daniels the Heisman this weekend. But my God, it's based on the discourse of the game, you would have thought Oregon won by 14 to 17 points that first time around. And so they were being given credit for something they didn't do. And I thought that the reason why I thought Oregon would win is that the game was such a coin flip the first time around that I figured, now this is going into what we call gambler's fallacy here a little bit, but I just figured that the coin would come up on the other side this time. But I never thought it would be a blowout, and, well, it was a 3-point win. Same margin as last time. So a very similar scoreline as last time, too. So, Oregon, and now Washington has beaten Oregon 3 straight times. They're at number 2. And congratulations to Michael Penix and Kalen DeBoer, and good luck, because you're going to need it. Number 3, and then numbers 3 and 4, this is where it gets dicey. So, with 2 undefeated Power Conference champions with multiple ranked wins, easy enough to put at 1 and 2. I said in my video on Friday that there were probably 8 teams total still alive. Ohio State was eliminated with Texas winning, so we can get them out of the way. Oregon was eliminated with their loss to Washington. And then we are all of a sudden in a position where it was down to Georgia at 12-1. Alabama at 12-1, winning the SEC with the head-to-head win over Georgia. Texas at 12-1 with the head-to-head win over Alabama, and then an undefeated Florida State. As it turns out, Florida State's third-string quarterback ended up starting. The guy's a true freshman, never started a game at the FBS level before, and well, the numbers show they played it super safe. And well, believe me, we'll talk about Florida State. So the dilemma was, well, you can't put Georgia in, even though they hadn't lost a game in 3 years, or nearly 3 years up to this point, because they don't really have any really top wins outside of maybe the Missouri game to hang their hats on, or Ole Miss. But like Tennessee and Missouri, I especially think a lot of the like the second tier SEC level teams were supremely overranked, and this has the ripple effect of overinflating the top end to artificially boost their resumes. There is no friggin' way you can tell me that with similar records, Clemson would lose to Tennessee, or that Utah would lose to Tennessee. I don't believe it. Tennessee lost to a team that Utah beat by double digits. Let's remember that. And so Georgia had the weakest case of the remaining 4 teams, so they were out. And so it comes down to Texas, Alabama, Florida State for those final 2 spots. And then we get to Texas having a head-to-head win over Alabama. And so regardless of what you do with that last spot, Texas gets one of the two remaining spots, and that's fair. And so then we have Michigan, Washington, Texas. And then it comes down to Florida State versus Alabama. The committee picked Alabama, and I think this is a complete and utter disgrace. Let's be honest. If let's say Ole Miss was 12-1, or change, you know what? Change the conference out. Let's say that a Clemson team. Let's do a little hypothetical here. Let's say Clemson was going into the ACC title game after having won 2 straight national titles and a third straight undefeated regular season this year, and then they lose to a 1-loss Florida State team whose only loss is to Texas, and then they are paired up with and then it comes down to a 12-1 Florida State team with a head-to-head loss over one of the other playoff teams. You set them against an Alabama team that is down to its third-string quarterback and has looked shaky but elite, shaky on offense but elite on defense. Can you honestly tell me with a straight face that if the names on the jerseys in this situation were removed, that Florida State would go in over Alabama? Because I do not for a single second believe it. This is the third time in a dozen years that Alabama has been artificially given this kind of benefit of the doubt. 2011, where they lost to the team that went to the national title game, didn't even win their division, let alone their conference, and they were put in over a team with a similar record that lost a close game on the road in the middle of a huge tragedy for their school. But because it's Alabama, we got to put them in. So 2011, the death knell of the BCS. 2017, same deal. They lost to the only good team they played in the regular season, Auburn, and didn't win their division, didn't win their conference. And then not only that, there was another undefeated team that got ranked no higher than 12th that year, UCF. UCF turned around and beat the team that beat both national title game participants in that year, which is why they claimed that national title. And then it came down to a 12-1 and an 11-1 Alabama versus a 12-1 Wisconsin team whose only sin that year was playing Ohio State on a weekend where Alabama was at home. If the positions were reversed and Alabama was at home, and Alabama had to play that last game and lost the conference title game, and Wisconsin was sitting at home at 11-1. Would they have been given that benefit of the doubt? No. And for the record, Alabama won the title game, won the championship both of those years that I mentioned. It doesn't matter. They should never have been given access to begin with. I don't care if it's Nick Saban. I don't care if it's Alabama. I don't care if it's the SEC. They did not have the resume, and it's completely unjustifiable. You cannot tell me that a Power 5 team that has gone undefeated, that played and beat LSU to a worse margin on a neutral site than Alabama did. You cannot tell me that that team does not deserve it. That defense is littered with NFL players. And I know I haven't been high on Florida State, but they are an undefeated Power 5 team. This is a disgrace to the sport. And to be honest, it's a really good thing we're going to the 12-team playoff model next year, because this is the issue I had when it was announced that we were going to the 4-team playoff following the last couple years of the BCS. I was one of the people, and even though I was like 15, 16 at the time, I was one of the people who was advocating for a playoff system even then, because this idea of if we're going to give picking a national champion this kind of importance, you have to get it right. You can't do this subjective beauty pageant BS, because you have situations like Auburn in 2004 went completely undefeated, won the SEC as an undefeated team. And then they got left out in favor of undefeated Oklahoma and USC. Well, you have 3 undefeated Power 5 teams in only 2 spots. What the hell do you do? If we were still in the BCS and there were 3 undefeated teams, Michigan, Washington, and Alabama, would that still happen? Would the SEC champion get left out? No, they wouldn't. We all know that. Because the SEC has this like giant propaganda to all of them. And sure, and a lot of that reputation is earned for the most part, especially where Alabama is concerned. But if you take a look at the non-conference almost every single key non-conference matchup that that entire conference had, they fell on their faces. Alabama lost at home by double digits to Texas. Georgia struggled mightily with a horrible Georgia Tech team. Sure, Missouri had like a 60-yard field goal to beat Kansas State, but that's like one of the few out-of-conference wins. And like one of the other key out-of-conference wins that this conference has is Ole Miss over Tulane, a game they were down more than 2 scores for a huge portion of. that conference was not. That conference is living off of its reputation this year, and like the ACC, especially more relevantly, Clemson, North Carolina, Florida State had 2 SEC wins this year over Florida State and LSU, who, by the way, is being held up as one of Alabama's marquee wins. And so this artificial strength of schedule metric, it doesn't matter if you have the strength of schedule if you lose the games against the best teams, which Alabama did. Sans the Georgia game. Now, you can argue that beating Georgia should earn anybody the right to play for a national championship, to which I say, not at the expense of an undefeated team. And if Florida State gets in, the choice comes down to Alabama or Texas, but Texas beat Alabama, and it's unconscionable to put in 2 teams of equal records where one lost to the other. You just can't do it. And so, what are you supposed to tell these kids? What do you because and let's look at that. Let's look at the ACC title game, because I picked Louisville because Louisville had a top 20 offense, and I just thought with Florida State losing everybody at the quarterback position, they just wouldn't be able to keep up. Here's what happened: they held a top 20 offense to under 3 yards of play. They held an offense that was averaging over 400 yards a game to less than 200. Louisville didn't get a first down until like late in the first half. And you're telling me that's not good enough? This is ridiculous. I'm sorry, Florida State. This isn't fair, and it's a really good thing that we're going to a 12-team playoff. 4 teams was never enough. It was always a half measure. I've been rewatching Breaking Bad, so there's that famous speech about no half measures. 4 teams was always a half measure, and I mean, the very first year we had 6 teams vying for 4 spots, and then 2 11-1 teams getting left out in the cold just because somebody has to get left out. And then you have undefeated teams. There's, to my mind, there's been at least 3 undefeated teams that have been left out. 4 now that have been left out. 3 of which were G5, but nobody cared because they were in the American Conference instead of the ACC. Yeah, really feeling for Florida State. Really feel for those guys. This is not a fair situation. Alabama should not have that spot. And so that's really all I have to say on this topic for today. I know this is a little bit more off the cuff, a little bit less produced than what I normally do on this show, but I just wanted to get a quick reaction out. Thank you guys once again for sticking with the show throughout this season. I will be coming out with another video on Friday to talk about the Heisman, to talk about the Army-Navy game. I will be doing previews on each of the playoff games and some of the New Year's 6 games as we head deeper into bowl season, and then we'll see what comes down the way. Like and subscribe to the channel, and give me comments. Do you agree with this diatribe I just went on, or do you think Alabama deserved that spot? Either way, let me know. And remember, follow my show here and the John Kime Report on Ampire Media here on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks, guys, and we will see you this weekend.